Hello and welcome to our short explanation of the organisation and function of the spinal cord in motor control. So the spinal cord has its white and its grey matter as well. The white matter is the tracks, and those tracks can either be ascending or descending tracks. The ascending tracks are depicted in blue over here on the left hand side of the figure, and our descending tracks are on the right hand side in red. So obviously when we're talking about motor control, it's important that we get sensory information up to the central nervous system, in particular the cerebral cortex, so that we can get those sensory impressions in. Helps with our obviously the perception portion of our perception action coupling, and we also need to get the action down to the appropriate level of the spinal cord to activate those alpha motor neurons that go out and contract the muscle. And so descending pathways are in the white matter, and ascending and descending pathways are in the white matter, and are very important in the functioning of motor control. Some important structures in terms of ascending pathways, we have our fasciculus cuneatus and fasciculus gracilis depicted in this picture underneath. It's showing that those large sensory fibers, our proprioceptors, the larger diameter type 1A and type 2 fibers. They are coming into the spinal cord via the dorsal root, and they basically jump in and travel up the spinal cord in that dorsal column. The gracilis portion is for our lower half of our spinal cord, so we think of it as being the legs, proprioception coming up that pathway, and the cuneatus coming for the upper limbs, the arms in particular. Other important ascending pathways are the anterior lateral system, which is within that anterior lateral system is our spinothalamic pathway. That's for our pain, temperature, and crude touch pathway, and then also our spinocerebellar pathways, which are pathways that allow for that proprioceptive information in particular to get directly to the cerebellum, and helps with the coordination of actions. Our descending pathways, lateral corticospinal tract and anterior corticospinal tract, are our voluntary control of our distal limbs and our trunk, respectively. And then we have all these other ones, the reticulospinal, the vestibulospinal, tectospinal tracts that are important in automatic movements. And automatic, by that I mean subconscious things like postural control, emotional motor center control, etc. So that's the white matter. The grey matter, in terms of our spinal cord, can be broken up into what we call rex laminae, and they have these nuclei sort of bundles within them. Now, for our purposes in this unit, we don't need to understand all the different names, don't need to memorize them. What we need to understand is that there are different layers, and within those different layers, different sensory information is being passed on or processed, or there's some sort of interneuron or cell column, whatever it might be. So at this point in time, all we need to understand is that our rex laminae, there's 10 layers. Within layers 1 to 5, which is in the dorsal horn of that grey matter, is where the sensory information is coming in. And predominantly what we're talking about in here in terms of interaction between neurons is the pain, temperature, crude touch type neurons. Our much smaller type A delta or C fibers are coming in, and they're synapsing onto interneurons. or synapsing onto second order ascending neurons in our anterior lateral system. More of that later. In our layers 7 in particular, this intermediate zone, that's where a lot of interneurons are found, and that's where we have this integration of sensory with motor function occurring. Other important structures in there are things like our dorsal column, Clark's nucleus, and our intermediolateral cell column. Important for proprioception going to the cerebellum and also autonomics. But importantly, in terms of motor output, in our layer, in our layer 8, we have these smaller interneurons that are having a direct influence over our larger alpha motor neurons, or our lower motor neurons that are found in layer 9. And essentially they then, that's in our anterior horn, they then exit out our anterior roots and then join in our spinal nerves to go out and innervate skeletal muscle. So obviously that's going to have a big impact on our ability to control actions. Now when we're talking about these descending tracks in particular, but also the interaction between our white and a grey matter, you'll notice that down here we have these descending tracks that are coming down and synapsing onto interneurons within that space that are in particular in our intermediate zone and also in our anterior horn. And that's where a lot of that processing is occurring before we get the final command or the final summation of inputs on that alpha motor neuron pool that goes out to activate muscles. And we can't forget that also within our grey matter of our spinal cord, we have what we call these intersegmental networks. And so it's not exactly a fact that each level of the spinal cord is independent from each other. There's a lot of intersegmental networks that actually help to coordinate multiple levels of the spinal cord so that we get nice smooth actions, because we know that muscles are innervated by nerves that are actually have contributing fibers from multiple levels of the spinal cord. So it helps to create nice smooth contractions. Now, an important function to remember about our spinal cord and its role in motor control is that it's not just a medium by which we pass information on, so either coming down or going up. It is a very important integrator, so it integrates sensory motor information. It helps to modulate and sort of sum up all the inputs. It helps to create the appropriate output to the muscles. So what we can see here is that we have sensory inputs coming in. Sensory inputs might have direct inputs onto our efferent or our lower motor neurons that go out to contract those muscles. But in reality, we also have these ascending pathways. We also have these inputs onto interneurons, which could be excitatory or inhibitory. And so what can happen is that, or what does happen is that the spinal cord helps to sort of dynamically calculate the requirements at a particular time and the final output from the lower motor neurons. And this is just a simple example of our tendon stretch reflex, whereby stretching the muscle spindle goes off, it comes in, and we cause direct activation or excitation of our alpha motor neuron pool of the stretched muscle. But at the same time, we need to modulate and sort of keep silent the antagonistic muscles. And so we have an ability to activate the interneuron, the inhibitory interneuron in this case, of the antagonist muscle. And that then makes it go silent, or at least dulls the tone down of that antagonist muscle. And so that just highlights the role that these segments of the spinal cord, intersegmental networks, these interneurons, and the spinal cord in itself plays in motor control. So that was just a quick overview of the role of the spinal cord in motor control. Thanks for listening, and talk to you soon.